When you finally set a boundary, why do you feel guilty? The purpose of this conversation tonight is not about convincing people to cut people off. It's about understanding why doing something healthy, saying no, and setting limits, speaking up, or asking for respect can sometimes make us feel like we've done something wrong. Stay with me. 'Cause guilt doesn't always mean that you did something wrong. Sometimes it just means that you did something different. Have you ever finally told someone no and then spent the next 3 hours wondering if you should have said yes? Have you ever set a boundary? You meant what you said, but then, like, guilt showed up. Then you're thinking to yourself, maybe I should call them back. Maybe I should have explained myself better. And before you know it, you're trying to negotiate yourself out of the boundary you just set. So tonight I want to talk about something we don't discuss enough. Why doing something healthy makes you feel so guilty. Welcome back to the Beth B Shift, where the vibe is unmuted, unafraid, and unapologetic. I'm Beth, and tonight we're going to talk about boundary guilt. And just so we're clear, I'm not a therapist. This is a conversation that's not meant to be therapeutic. I'm speaking about lived experience and sharing what I've learned. I'm not here to diagnose, and I'm not here to say everybody's toxic. We're talking about us because awareness is a tool, not a weapon. So let's talk about boundaries, right? So what is a boundary? A boundary is it's not punishment. A boundary is it's not even revenge. A boundary is not about controlling someone. A boundary communicates what you will and will not participate in. For example, right? I can say to you, I'm not going to tolerate a person who yells at me. But I can't stop a person from saying or using the tone of voice they choose to use. I can't do that. I can tell you what it is that I don't want. I can suggest to you what it is that I won't tolerate. But what you choose to do with your own mouth and your person, that's up to you. My only job is if you start yelling, I'm responsible for ending the conversation and possibly saying, let's revisit this another time when you're calm. See the difference? It's not the same. But some people try to use boundaries as a control mechanism. That's not what that tool is for. It's not what it's for at all. Have you ever like thought you set a boundary when you were actually trying to change a person's behavior? Because that doesn't work. Trying to change someone's behavior by setting a boundary and making yourself believe that they're going to comply, that's a hard thing. Because once we're adults, we're adults. It's kind of difficult to explain to tell another adult what they can and cannot do. They're destined not to comply because you don't get to tell them what to do, right? The onus is on you to determine what you'll tolerate and then shut that down when you have an opportunity to do so. Two different things. So Why does saying no feel so bad? And this is where we get a little bit deeper, right? Because some of us learn that being good people or being a good person or keeping everybody happy or avoiding conflict, being available, always saying yes, like always saying yes, over explaining yourself and making sure nobody's upset with you. That was one of my biggest things. I always tried to be the neutral one. I always tried to be the person in the middle that didn't have an opinion for nay or yay. I saw both sides of the story, and I always said to myself, if I remain neutral, I'm good. No one will ever be able to say that I was responsible for A or B, but that doesn't always work. So when you finally say no, your mind may understand because you've talked to yourself three, four times and you've decided, I can't tolerate this, and this is what I'm going to do to minimize the exposure to nonsense, right? So your mind may say no, but emotionally, you may not be prepared to understand what it is that you're thinking. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but sometimes it takes the heart a little time to catch up with the mind, right? And then when you're emotionally detached from what you're thinking, you feel like what you're doing is completely wrong. And here's a Beth B moment, right? Maybe the guilt isn't telling you you did something wrong. Maybe that's not the thing. Maybe the guilt or the feelings, the emotion attached to the emotions attached to the decision you made, maybe it's not telling you that it's wrong. You did something you're just not accustomed to. You did something different. And those are not the same thing. The over explaining. Have you ever said no and then wrote a whole dissertation about why you said no? Like, I can't come because, and then you leave a whole paragraph. And then that one paragraph's not enough. You have to leave a second paragraph, right? And then you have to have supporting details. So now you take a screenshot of the meeting that was just called and you send that email or that screenshot or whatever it is that's keeping you from being present where you or justifying why you didn't make a meeting. You, we send exhibits. We send exhibits when when we can't do something because we need to prove, right? We need to prove. We're not explaining because a person needs information. Sometimes we're explaining things because we need them to approve our decision. Now, let me ask you this, right? Can you tolerate someone misunderstanding your boundaries without abandoning them? Let me explain. If I say to you, I'm not going to tolerate you yelling at me, and then you shut down the conversation, the next time you speak, right, because there's a process, you shut down the conversation, the person you're talking to is a little salty, so they give you the silent treatment for a little while, you accept the silent treatment, you back up from the situation, and then when you guys meet up again, now it seems like a clear time for you to talk about the situation because both parties appear to be calm. Everybody seems to be mature enough to handle the conversation. We're both aware of the subject matter. So it's like, okay, I know what we're going to talk about. So let me be calm and we'll be crystal clear. But what happens is the person already knows you're not going to tolerate them yelling at you. So they'll start off with a tone that's already unaccepting. They'll start off with that tone and they try to be calm and then they'll go with the tone. And when you mention it, oh, we're getting a little loud. It's getting a bit busty. They'll remind you, well, this is just who I am. And this is how I talk. So, I mean, I want to talk, but if you can't, I mean, if we can't talk like this, then I'm good. And then what do we start doing? Because we want to have the conversation, because that is our friend, because we've been waiting to get the opportunity to talk to our friend, what do? We start minimizing and backtracking from the boundaries we set in the first place. And we only do it because, like, their disappointment makes us feel like we've done something wrong when it wasn't us to begin with. And again, we're not pointing fingers, but these are some of the things that happens when we set boundaries, and then it influences us to go backwards. It influences us to say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be the nice one. I'm going to keep peace. I'm going to keep peace. And just like, disappointment is not automatically your wrongdoing. And this is important because someone can be disappointed with your decision. They can be disappointed with your decision all day. You can still have made the right decision for yourself. Like, both things can exist. They could be disappointed with me because I'm no longer willing to tolerate their nonsense. The person could be disappointed with me because I'm no longer tolerating them yelling at me or being disrespectful and using a tone that I do not appreciate. They can be disappointed with me because I don't want to hear, or I can't tolerate the movement, the aggressiveness. I don't have to tolerate that. And that's where I find peace with myself. But what can exist at the same time is that I made a decision that is best for me. My friend can be disappointed that I didn't show up for an event. My family member can wish I said yes when I said no. My partner can disagree with me because we don't see eye to eye. That doesn't automatically mean that I'm wrong. But, and this matters, it doesn't automatically mean they're toxic either, right? That's when that moment of maturity comes in, because now I know you don't have to comply with everything I said, but I don't have to tolerate everything that you do. Healthy people are allowed to have feelings about our boundaries. They are. That's just it. The question becomes, can they respect the boundaries even when they don't like them? And can I hear their feelings without immediately surrendering my boundaries? Like, why do I always have to fold? Why am I always the one that has to keep the peace? I'm not trying to be disturbing, or I'm not trying to be toxic, but I have to protect my peace. And my peace sometimes looks like me standing up for myself despite how it may make others feel. And if they don't like my boundaries, we can talk about it. We can talk about it. And then, like, boundaries don't remove accountability. We need to be clear about that. And here's where the awareness becomes important, because we can't call everything a boundary, right? We can't call everything a boundary simply because we don't want to deal with something. That's not how it goes. Sometimes we need to ask ourselves, am I protecting my peace, or am I avoiding an uncomfortable conversation? There's the difference. A healthy boundary should still leave room for reflection. It should leave room for communication. It should leave room for accountability. Compromise when appropriate, right? And admitting when we did something wrong or we got something wrong. Setting boundaries doesn't always mean I can do whatever I want and nobody can question me. That's not a boundary. That's not a healthy boundary at all. Because Setting a boundary is the purpose of setting a boundary is not to control others. It's to protect your peace. Because discomfort doesn't always mean danger, right? And this is a really big one. Like, this is the one we have to hone in on. Sometimes being unhappy with you can feel uncomfortable. Someone disagreeing with you can feel uncomfortable. Someone saying, I don't like that, can feel uncomfortable. But discomfort isn't automatically danger. Sometimes we're accustomed to preventing conflict that another person's disappointment feels like an emergency. Like, how many times have you said no and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, I should have said no. I always say yes. Like, what's happening? We become hyper vigilant and then we're all over the place, thinking about, worrying about what this other person is thinking. Meanwhile, they've called someone else to answer the call because you couldn't. And that's okay. Just because someone isn't happy with your decision doesn't mean you overturn it to deal with their happiness. That's not always fair. Sometimes no is appropriate. And here's another Beth B moment, right? I want somebody in this thread or whoever's listening, if you're allowed to reconsider a boundary, you are allowed to realize you were wrong. Because we're not always right. We're not always right. And you're allowed to apologize. I'm allowed to apologize when I've come to the conclusion that I could have made a better decision, that I overthought something, or that I said the wrong thing, or that I did something wrong. I'm allowed to apologize. There's no conundrum there. I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to adjust when appropriate. But I'm not going to abandon every boundary simply because somebody had a rejection to the boundary in the first place. And if every no becomes a yes, the moment somebody gets upset, then your boundary wasn't really yours. The reaction was still controlling it. And that's something worth being aware of. Like, we have to be aware of what's happening exactly in front of us. But here's the shift. Before you change a boundary because you feel guilty, ask yourself, did I actually hurt someone? Did I violate one of my own values? And we're going to talk about that in another episode because that's truly important. If you don't know what your values are, then you don't know what boundaries to set. Was I disrespectful in how I communicated my boundaries? Is the boundary protecting something important? Or am I simply uncomfortable because someone doesn't like my answer? That's the difference between examining guilt and automatically obeying. And here's the reset, right? A boundary doesn't have to feel comfortable to be healthy. And someone else's disappointment doesn't automatically mean you did something wrong. And feeling guilty doesn't automatically mean you are guilty. Listen to the feeling, examine it. Take accountability where accountability belongs, but don't automatically hand your boundary back because guilt knocked at the door. Guilt does not always mean you did it or that you did something wrong. Sometimes it means that you did something different. And there's another side of this conversation. What happens when you start changing and the people around you don't like the new version of you? When they start saying, you've changed. Well, maybe you have. And that's where we're going. That's exactly where we're going. If tonight's conversation shifted something in you, please share this with someone else. Share this with someone who's felt guilt because they said no. This has been the Beth B Shift. And until I see you guys again, stay grounded.